One day after 13 years of marriage, my husband abruptly, but not totally out of the blue, announced he was moving out. I'm a psychologist and an author, and I was sitting at the computer one day working on my first book and feeling good about how it was coming along when my husband walked into the room with two mismatched duffel bags in his hands, and he started talking. "I'm not happy. I don't think you're happy." Most of what he said is a blur now, but I'm sure it wasn't anything I hadn't heard him say many times before. I interrupted him, resigned to where I knew this was going, and his attempt to soften the blow really was just making things worse. "What are you trying to say?" I asked him. Just cut to the chase. More words from him, most of it's also a blur, and by the end of the evening, my husband was gone. Just the night before, I had come to the very painful realization that my marriage had fallen apart, and I felt totally disconnected from him and from myself. I cried out to God with some very difficult questions. What do I need to do? What can I do to fix this? The answer I heard in my heart surprised me. Do nothing. Be kind, gentle, tender-hearted, and forgiving. Otherwise, there's nothing more for you to do. What? Do nothing? There must be some mistake. Maybe I was missing the point. Perhaps the point was not so much to do nothing, rather the point was to do something different. And I had tried so many things to fix my marriage that in my case, doing nothing was definitely something different. The irony was not lost on me because I was in the middle of writing a book called Do Something Different for a Change. I clearly knew that I needed to do something different. So I began to apply every concept that I knew about transformation and change. And like an expert diamond cutter, I examined my current situation through the lens of my psychological knowledge and expertise. And I looked at each difficulty in my life and how I planned I would apply these principles of change to the beautiful diamond I believe my life could still become. I had studied up on diamond cutters, and I learned that they have to determine the best way to cut a rough diamond to produce the most beauty and profit. And the stone can be left at its maximum weight, losing much of its brilliance and sparkle, or it can be cut down into a much smaller, more beautiful diamond. Well, life's adversities provide opportunities to cut away the things that keep us from becoming the best possible person we can be. And to achieve your true brilliance, you must be willing to go through this process. Well, don't get me wrong. I'm certainly not suggesting that I needed to cut my husband out of my life in order to shine. That was the last thing that I wanted. But difficult circumstances can serve as the pressure that's needed to take an ordinary rock like me and form it into a radiant diamond. Well, at first I believed that the way I was feeling, broken and empty and disconnected, I thought it was totally due to the problems in my marriage and my husband. But when I dug deeper, I discovered that I was broken, empty, and disconnected before I even met him. My strong desire to get married and even have a family in the first place was my attempt to address these painful feelings. And when my marriage went bad, I figured if I could just fix it, I'd feel better. But I was focusing my attention on the wrong things. What I didn't realize at the time is that I had to go back and examine all of my childhood issues and my hurts and my disappointments and fears and what I believed about them and what I did in response that caused even more pain and suffering. I had to embrace those feelings and acknowledge how disconnected I had become in order to see all of my negative beliefs and responses clearly. This was really painful and was the main reason why I hadn't done it any sooner. Truly experiencing the pain of my past was and is hard and scary, and it cost me a lot, my marriage in fact. But eventually I did it. I started journaling and spent a lot of time in quiet reflection, and I even was in therapy for a time. And I learned that a lot of my pain and suffering was primarily due to the erroneous beliefs I had and fears that I had, fears of shame and abandonment that I had as a child. And I also had a lot of issues around not feeling good enough, something I really struggled with. Applying some of the techniques that you're going to learn in this workbook, and I refocused my attention and changed those beliefs, and subsequently I just chose to do something different, live my life differently. And it took a lot of time. I'm 48. It's taken my whole life. It took a lot of hard work and still does. But eventually my emotional pain and emptiness were healed, and my broken heart was restored. And I've experienced a lot of change, lasting change in my life. I'm still not finished, never will be, but I'm a lot further along than I was. And as a friend once said, you'd have to know the old me to appreciate the new me.